Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are going to talk about, we're starting a new series, right? And we're starting on a Tuesday, so forgive that. I had a very busy weekend and wasn't able to start doing our devotionals for Monday, but this is just as good. And we're going to start today, and we're going to look at something that may not be super exciting for everyone, but definitely has this great testimony behind it. So I wanted to share it with you and then do a devotional series on that, because I'm finding it's really helpful to people as I share a little bit of my testimony and why I'm looking at these parts of the Bible at this time. Like, why am I looking at this? And so today we're going to start the series on suffering, sacrifice, and other undesirables. And we're going to talk about how I kind of got to this place of looking at suffering and sacrifice and how my mind had to be changed in that area. So the slide that you're about to look at right now is showing you an overview of what we're going to do for days 2, 3, and 4 as we end the week. And so we're going to start with David, the Ark, and Obed-Edom from 2 Samuel chapter 6. Then we're going to look at the New Testament believers in 2 Timothy 2. And then we're going to talk about Saul's disobedience in 1 Samuel 15. So we're going to go Old Testament, New Testament, Old Testament. And we're going to look at suffering and sacrifice in these examples. But before we get started with that, I have to give you context to why we're doing it. So if you're watching day 2 of this devotional series or Wednesday's devotional, go back to Tuesday and watch day 1 first. Watch this one first in order, because it's super important. I guess if you're watching, anyhow, I just did a disclaimer that really doesn't make any sense. If you're watching this one, keep watching it. Now, moving forward, I want to talk about what happened to me in this area. So as I was working through some of my issues in interpersonal relationships, I came into this place in which I realized that I had a concern that manifests as like a fear of man, and I wasn't really sure where the manifestation of it was. And so I went into my own inner healing and I did my own work. And you have to know that about people who do inner healing, counseling, any type of work like that, we are really mandated to continue with those services for ourselves as needed. So basically we have people in the pocket that we run to when we know we're running into a personal issue that needs to be addressed, because it's important that we as much as possible stay accountable to a body of people to help us to be well. So in that work, I found out this place in myself where I had this underlying fear of man, and I hadn't recognized that it was there. And what happened as we worked through it was that I realized that really I had an issue with suffering and sacrifice, and I viewed suffering and sacrifice from this skewed perspective. And so these 3 stories kind of are going to illuminate, and they brought me some healing and restoration and truth about what suffering and sacrifice really looks like in the Word, and what God is calling us to when He's saying suffering and sacrifice, and what that really means and how it's exemplified through these particular stories. But what happened to me is that I really, and having had negative experiences with people, has started to kind of feel like that was part of my Christian duty, was to suffer, and that people would do you wrong and you just suffer and you just go through it. And as a Christian, you just suffer, and as you know, turn the other cheek and just keep suffering. People keep on mistreating you, and you should become acclimated to suffering. So there was a part of me, as you can only imagine, that was like, I don't want to do that. I just don't want to, right? I don't want to suffer. So I'm going to keep some distance, or I'm going to protect myself, or I'm going to set up these guards, and I'm going to protect myself from suffering. And sometimes that meant then protecting myself from God in some areas, because my view of God in that particular area was skewed. Even slightly off was a problem. And so I was like, well, God, you want us to be like you, and you suffered and you didn't do anything when you were against those who were hurting you when you were suffering. So that's kind of how you want us to live our life. Just let people hurt us and we'll just go through it. And because we love you, we go through it, and we have to just be okay, kind of eat it up. Don't worry about it. Don't go making a big deal about it. Don't go telling everybody that you're suffering. Just deal with it in the short. And that's not true. Okay. It's not a correct perspective of scripture. It's not a correct perspective of God. It's not a correct perspective of suffering, but it was the perspective that I had adopted many, many years ago in the churches that I was raised in. Is that kind of like, well, we all just going to go through and it's all going to be terrible, but you love God, so it's going to be okay. Well, no. The suffering and the sacrifice became very clear that I misunderstood what was happening. And as I was working with another counselor and she was guiding me through this process of healing, she started to correct and identify and then correct some of the lies that I was believing. And what it led me to understanding was this, is that when I looked at suffering, I thought suffering like how Christ suffered was what he wanted us to endure. But the truth is, the only person that actually suffers as Christ suffered was Christ, because in his suffering there was redemption. In your suffering there is no benefit because we're not Christ, right? So in my suffering, I'm not the Son of God. So because I'm not the Son of God, my suffering doesn't bring upon anybody the remission of sin. It doesn't resolve anything because I'm not the Lamb of God. And so I mistakenly took upon myself that I'm just going to suffer and be afflicted like Christ did. Now, it wasn't as bad as some people, because there's a whole sect of believers in different nations, mostly in different nations, who actually physically afflict themselves to identify with the suffering of Christ. And when I was thinking about identifying with the suffering of Christ, I kind of just thought about it as people mistreating you. They're just going to mistreat you and you just let them mistreat you, and it is kind of what it is. And I didn't like it. And so I was kind of making a distance between me and God, because I was like, yeah, I'm not really with that part of it, right? I don't really like the idea that you're going to put me through something and I'm going to have to identify with your suffering in this way, that people are going to hurt me and I'm going to have to just identify with your suffering in this way. I just don't like it. Like, I can't get with it. I want to protect myself. I want to feel safe. I don't want to feel like people are coming at me. So I'm going to make myself distant in this way from you, God, because I don't like the concept that I'm believing about you, and from other people, because I'm already seeing that they can be extremely reckless and dangerous and they don't seem too much care. So I'm not going to involve myself in what they're doing, and I'm not really going to involve myself too much in what you're doing in this particular area. Even though I'm a servant of the Most High, I'm going to do all these other things, but when it gets to these people, I have an idea of what I'm about to allow, and I'm going to have an idea of what I'm going to let you allow in these places. And I know it sounds funny, and why I'm laughing is because it's almost ludicrous, but these are the type of beliefs that we operate on a daily basis, and we don't recognize it until we find ourselves in a place of brokenness that can be only manifest in relationship. And then we say, oh, that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to protect myself. Oh, that's what I've been doing. I haven't been trusting God in this place. Oh, that's what I've been doing. I have set up my own parameters, my own rules, and I'm trying to live by those rules, and then I'm calling God into accountability to the rules I've set up rather than living by his way. And so this is what happens. I mean, not only is it what happens, this is the work that we really do. Like, legitimately, we sit with people every day, and somebody had to sit with me and work through these places in our minds where we believe something about God that is untrue. And not only do we believe it, but we act out our whole life about it. We surround ourselves with this ideology that is incorrect, erroneous, false, whatever way you want to put it, deceptive. And we can live it out. And then we want to blame other people for where they are at it and what they don't have with it. And it becomes this really just dysfunctional place. But God has a plan for us to be well and for us to walk in truth. And it happens definitely within community. But it's interesting because we can even buck up against community, right? We can be angry with people that are around us because they present a truth that we don't want to receive. And so it's important that we find ourselves examining our position and making sure that that position can be corrected. And over the next 3 days, I'm going to talk about the correction of my position in the area and understanding of sacrifice and suffering, because there are a few things that are true. It's true that in this world we will have troubles, which means that this world will have some problems. And because we're in this world and this world is fallen, that there will be hardship and difficulties that we all have to endure. But that's called life, right? God is not calling, no, because you're a Christian, he's not calling you to a special place in life in which you are literally literally being tormented, tortured, abused, or mistreated. Anybody telling you that is absolutely lying, because the truth of the matter is this: when we're talking about sacrifice and suffering within a biblical context, we may not be talking about the torment and the deception or the brokenness that comes from abuse, and that comes from torture, that comes from things that really God never intended for man. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying willfully be tortured, willfully be tormented. No, the Lord rebukes that. As a matter of fact, he is not desiring for us to be tormented or for us to be tortured. He does not want us to be afraid of people because of what they have done to us. He does not want us to protect ourselves. He wants to be our protection. And so there's a lot of erroneous places where we can find ourselves in these ways. And if you'll journey with me for the next 3 days, you're going to find that these are the places that God corrected in me. One, sacrifice and suffering have a purpose, but sacrifice and suffering are very much closer aligned than one might think. But even in addition to that, the undesirable nature of it can be turned around if we understand it from the right context. Not this understanding that we're going to have a life in which we're never going to have any issues or troubles. Now, you're going to have some troubles, but there's a way to understand sacrifice and suffering, and there's a way that's not correct in that. And so I'm kind of going to go through the process of what I thought and how it got turned around. And God is going to, by the grace of God, he's going to minister to more than just me through this process, but demonstrating that his love for us is so big and so great that in these particular examples, he's showing us how we are to be and how that is incorporated with suffering and both sacrifice. It's a beautiful journey. I hope that you're with me on it. We're praying for you, praying that you are not have been misled or misguided in these areas. But if you are, you picked the perfect devotional series. If you're protecting yourself, this is the perfect devotional series for you. I want you to rest in the Lord, and if you have an opportunity, go back and look at those examples that we just talked about, and join with us again tomorrow as we continue another